The Galactic Strength Tournament was the epitome of physical prowess and intergalactic rivalry. Every year, the galaxy's strongest warriors gathered to compete for glory, honor, and the title of Supreme Champion. The event was a spectacle of unparalleled magnitude, drawing audiences from the farthest reaches of the universe. This year's tournament promised to be no different until a curious anomaly occurred on Earth. A minor bureaucratic mix-up would set into motion a series of events that no one could have foreseen. Karis and Claire, a 28-year-old engineer from Terra 1 space station, had spent her life solving mechanical problems and navigating the intricacies of human-made spacecraft. She was no warrior, no soldier, and certainly no contender for an event like the Galactic Strength Tournament. Yet, due to an administrative error involving a misfiled application, her name ended up on the list of participants. By the time the error was discovered, the tournament's bureaucracy had deemed the registration irreversible. Kara received the notification with a mixture of confusion and dread. At first, she assumed it was a prank or spam message, but as follow-up communications arrived from the Galactic Council, she realized the gravity of the situation. She was to represent Earth in a competition that no human had ever been invited to voluntarily, let alone survived. Participation was mandatory, and failure to appear carried a penalty severe enough to jeopardize her entire colony's standing within the Galactic Alliance. Her co-workers tried to reassure her, though their attempts were laced with nervous laughter. "Just show up and lose gracefully," one had said. "They probably won't kill you for participating." Others weren't as optimistic. "Do you have a will? You might want to update it," another joked, though the worry in their eyes betrayed their humor. Kara didn't have time to protest. Within days, she was whisked away on a council transport vessel. Her earthly belongings were reduced to a single duffel bag and a datapad containing every technical manual she could download. She had no strategy, no preparation, and no idea what awaited her. Her escort, a stern-faced alien with translucent skin and glowing blue veins, offered little comfort. "You're an unusual participant," he remarked coldly. "Humans are not known for their physical capabilities. This should be interesting." Upon arrival at the tournament venue, Kara's sense of dread deepened. The arena was massive, a dome of shimmering energy that reflected the stars of the galaxy. Hundreds of thousands of spectators filled the stands, their voices a cacophony of alien languages. Kara's eyes scanned the crowd, taking in creatures of all shapes and sizes, some with multiple limbs, others with scales or fur, and many towering over her diminutive frame. Her fellow competitors were no less intimidating. The lineup consisted of warriors from every corner of the galaxy, each more fearsome than the last. There was Gorith, a hulking reptilian behemoth from the molten planet of Xiron, whose biceps alone seemed larger than Kara's entire torso. Beside him stood Vera, a crystalline being from the ice fields of Cyrus, whose sharp-edged limbs glittered like deadly shards of glass. Every competitor exuded an aura of power and menace, and all of them turned to stare when Kara timidly entered the preparation chamber. The silence was palpable as she walked in, her small frame dwarfed by the towering aliens around her. A few snickered, others outright laughed. "Is this a joke?" One of them sneered, his voice a guttural growl. "They're sending humans now? I didn't realize the tournament had become a charity event." Kara's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing. She had no illusions about her odds of survival, let alone victory. Her only goal was to avoid making a complete fool of herself, and if possible, live through the experience. She retreated to a corner of the chamber, avoiding eye contact as she prepared for the first challenge. The opening ceremony was a spectacle of light and sound. Holographic displays projected the names and homeworlds of each competitor, accompanied by roaring applause from the audience. When Kara's name appeared, the cheers were notably muted, replaced by murmurs of confusion. "A human?" one announcer exclaimed incredulously. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is unprecedented. It seems the Galactic Council has allowed a human to participate this year. Let's see how long she lasts." Kara felt her stomach churn as she was led to the arena floor. The first challenge was announced, the test of strength. Competitors were tasked with lifting a neutronium boulder, a material so dense that even the strongest aliens struggled to move it. The task was simple: lift the boulder and hold it aloft for as long as possible. Failure to lift it meant immediate elimination. One by one, the competitors took their turns. Gorith, the reptilian giant, stepped forward first. With a roar that shook the arena, he wrapped his massive claws around the boulder and heaved it into the air. The crowd erupted in cheers as he held it high, his muscles bulging under the strain. After a full minute, he dropped the boulder with a thunderous crash, earning a standing ovation. Vera followed, her crystalline limbs refracting the arena lights as she lifted the boulder with surprising ease. She held it aloft for nearly 2 minutes before setting it down gracefully, earning another wave wave of applause. Kara watched in growing despair as each competitor displayed their incredible strength. When her name was called, she hesitated, her legs feeling like lead. The announcer's voice boomed overhead. And now, our final contestant, Karis and Claire of Earth. Will the human even manage to lift it? She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The boulder loomed before her, its sheer size and weight a physical manifestation of her fear. Taking a deep breath, she placed her hands on its smooth surface. The crowd jeered, their laughter echoing in her ears. "Come on, little human," someone shouted. "Show us what you've got." Kara closed her eyes and focused. She wasn't strong, not by their standards, but she was smart. She had spent her life solving problems, and this was just another problem to solve. Instead of relying on brute force, she examined the boulder for leverage points, testing its balance and center of gravity. Slowly, methodically, she shifted her weight and used her legs to push upward. To the astonishment of everyone, the boulder began to move. The laughter stopped abruptly as Kara heaved it off the ground. Her body trembled with effort. She didn't hold it for long, barely 10 seconds, but it was enough to pass the challenge. She dropped the boulder with a resounding thud and collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. For a moment, the arena was silent. Then, a ripple of applause began to spread, hesitant at first, but growing in intensity. Incredible! Against all odds, Kara Sinclair has completed the test of strength. Ladies and gentlemen, the human has proven she's no pushover. Kara staggered to her feet, her limbs aching but her spirit bolstered. She had survived the first challenge, defied expectations, and earned a sliver of respect. But as she looked at her competitors, their faces a mix of surprise and disdain. She knew the real battle was just beginning. The test of strength was over, but the echoes of Kara's unexpected success still rippled through the arena. As the competitors returned to their quarters, Kara could feel the weight of their eyes on her. Some glanced at her with curiosity, others with disdain, and a few with grudging respect. The crystalline Vera, who had been one of the top performers, offered her a subtle nod, but it was the reptilian Goritha's snort of derision that stayed with her. "You got lucky," he muttered as he walked past. "Neutronium doesn't measure true strength. You're a fluke, human. You won't last the next round." Kara didn't reply. She didn't have the energy to engage, and truth be told, she wasn't sure he was wrong. The test of strength had been about strategy as much as brute force, and she had barely scraped through. If the next round required pure physical power, she knew her luck might run out. Back in her assigned quarters, Kara sank onto the edge of the narrow cot. The room was Spartan, designed more for function than comfort, with a small viewport that overlooked the alien skyline. Stars twinkled in the distance, their light casting faint patterns on the metallic walls. She stared at them for a long moment, trying to calm the storm of thoughts in her mind. Her data pad chimed, pulling her back to the present. It was a notification from the tournament organizers detailing the next round's challenge, the Endurance Gauntlet. Kara read the description carefully, her anxiety mounting with every word. The gauntlet was a grueling obstacle course set on an artificially designed hostile environment. Competitors would navigate through scorching heat, acidic rain, high-pressure zones, and other treacherous conditions, all while covering a distance of 30 kilometers. The course was designed to push even the strongest warriors to their breaking points, and medical evacuation was not uncommon. A soft knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Vera standing there, her crystalline form shimmering under the corridor's lights. Up close, the alien was both beautiful and intimidating, her sharp-edged limbs refracting light like a living prism. "I came to offer advice," Vera said, her voice mild but edged with caution. "You surprised everyone today, but the gauntlet will be different. It's not just about strength or speed. It's about resilience." Kara hesitated, unsure if this was an act of kindness or a calculated move. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Vera tilted her head, her features inscrutable. "Because I respect survivors, and because I know the others are underestimating you. I prefer to face opponents who've earned their place." Kara nodded slowly, her guard still up but grateful for the insight. Vera didn't stay long, offering only a few cryptic tips before leaving Kara alone once more. "Conserve your energy," she had said. "The gauntlet isn't won by those who burn the brightest. It's won by those who endure." The next morning, Kara joined the other competitors in the arena. The stands were packed again, the spectators buzzing with anticipation. The holographic announcer introduced the challenge with theatrical flair, its deep voice echoing across the dome. "Welcome to the Endurance Gauntlet. Only the strongest, smartest, and most determined will survive this trial. Let the race begin." The starting line was marked by a pulsating energy barrier. As the countdown began, Kara adjusted the lightweight survival suit she had been issued. It wasn't designed for human physiology, and it It chafed uncomfortably against her skin. Around her, the other competitors were already psyching themselves up, stretching, roaring, or sharpening their natural weapons. When the barrier dropped, chaos erupted. The first segment of the gauntlet led through a searing desert landscape. Twin suns blazed overhead, their combined heat creating mirages that danced across the horizon. The ground was covered in shifting sands that clung to Kara's boots, making every step an effort. Her competitors surged ahead, their massive forms moving with surprising agility. Gorath plowed through the sand like a tank, while Vera glided over it as if skating on ice. Kara knew she couldn't keep up with their pace. Instead, she focused on steady, deliberate movements, keeping her breathing controlled and her energy conserved. The suit's cooling system struggled to keep her temperature stable, and sweat dripped down her face, stinging her eyes. She reminded herself of Vera's advice: endurance, not speed. By the time she reached the first checkpoint, several competitors were already showing signs of strain. The heat was unrelenting, even for the hardiest species. One quadrupedal alien had collapsed, its handlers rushing in to drag it off the course. Kara felt a grim sense of satisfaction as she passed by. She wasn't the fastest, but she was still standing. The next segment was a swampy quagmire, its air thick with noxious fumes. The ground was a treacherous mix of mud and acidic pools, each step threatening to pull Kara under. She moved cautiously, testing the ground before committing her weight. Around her, competitors were struggling. Gorath roared in frustration as his massive frame sank into the muck, and even Vera seemed to falter, her crystalline form dulling under the corrosive rain. Kara's smaller size and lighter weight became an advantage here. She found paths that the larger aliens couldn't navigate, skirting the worst of the acid pools. Her boots were beginning to disintegrate from the constant exposure, but she pressed on, determined not to lose her momentum. As the gauntlet wore on, the challenges became increasingly brutal. High-pressure zones forced competitors to crawl through narrow tunnels, their bodies compressed under the crushing force. Kara's bones ached and her lungs burned with every breath, but she refused to give up. Her mind flashed back to her engineering days, where she had spent hours in cramped maintenance shafts troubleshooting complex systems. She channeled that same focus now, inching forward despite the pain. By the final segment, the field had thinned dramatically. Of the original 20 competitors, only a handful remained. The course opened into a windswept plateau, its surface slick with ice. Gale-force winds howled across the expanse, threatening to knock Kara off her feet. She wrapped her arms around herself for warmth, her teeth chattering as she trudged forward. The finish line was visible in the distance, a faint beacon of light that seemed impossibly far away. Her legs felt like lead, her body screaming for rest. But as she stumbled forward, she saw Gorath up ahead, his massive form visibly flagging. He glanced back and sneered when he saw her still there. "Still here, human?" he growled. "You're tougher than you look, but this is as far as you go." Kara didn't respond. She didn't have the energy for banter. Instead, she focused on putting one foot in front of the other, her mind narrowing to a single thought: keep moving. In the final stretch, it came down to pure willpower. Kara pushed through the pain, her vision blurring as her body threatened to shut down. When she finally crossed the finish line, she collapsed to the ground, barely registering the deafening cheers of the crowd. Medical drones swarmed around her, scanning her vitals and administering emergency care. She had survived against all odds. She had completed the endurance gauntlet, earning a place in the next round. As she lay on the ground, gasping for air, she felt a flicker of pride. She wasn't the strongest, the fastest, or the most skilled, but she was still standing. And in this tournament, that was enough. The morning after the endurance gauntlet, Kara awoke to the dull ache of muscles she hadn't realized existed. Every joint, every tendon protested as she swung her legs over the edge of the cot. The medics had patched her up well enough to keep her functioning, but the toll the race had taken on her body was undeniable. Her legs were heavy, her arms felt like dead weight, and her head throbbed faintly from dehydration. But she was alive, and for the moment, that was all that mattered. The gauntlet had reduced the pool of competitors significantly. Of the original 20, only 6 remained. Kara wasn't sure how she'd made it this far. The others were seasoned warriors, bred and trained for challenges like this. They were creatures of legend, fearsome, formidable, and honed for survival. She, by contrast, was an accidental participant, an engineer from a backwater human colony who had relied on quick thinking and sheer grit to survive. She wasn't supposed to be here. The realization weighed heavily on her as she dressed in the freshly cleaned survival suit provided by the tournament staff. Today was the final event, the showdown that would decide the champion. As she secured the straps of her suit, a hollow voice echoed through her quarters. It was the tournament announcer, its deep, resonant tone filling the air with a sense of gravitas. "Attention Attention, remaining competitors. Today's final challenge will test your combat prowess, strategic thinking, and adaptability. The format: one-on-one battles culminating in a final duel between the last two standing. Prepare yourselves. The arena awaits. Combat. Of course, it had to be combat. Kara felt her stomach sink. She had no weapons training, no knowledge of alien fighting techniques. Her only experience with physical altercations involved fending off the occasional drunken crewmate on Terra 1. How was she supposed to survive against the galaxy's most lethal warriors? She clenched her fists, forcing the rising panic down. The truth was simple. She couldn't win by fighting on their terms. If she wanted to make it through this, she would have to rely on the same qualities that had carried her through the previous rounds: her ingenuity, her adaptability, and her refusal to give up. The arena was a different configuration today. The once open expanse had been transformed into a labyrinth of towering walls, shifting platforms, and environmental hazards. Lava pits bubbled ominously, spiked barriers jutted out at irregular intervals, and sections of the ground glowed faintly, warning of potential traps. It was a battlefield designed to test not just strength, but awareness and quick thinking. The crowd was louder than ever, their cheers and chants reverberating through the dome. Kara felt their eyes on her as she stepped onto the arena floor, her small frame a stark contrast to the imposing figures of her competitors. Gorith, the reptilian giant, loomed nearby, his scaly skin glinting under the arena lights. Vera stood to the side, her crystalline form as sharp and unyielding as ever. The others, a humanoid with metallic skin, an insectoid with razor-like appendages, and a hulking quadruped covered in dense fur, completed the lineup. The announcer's voice boomed overhead. Round 1. Karis and Claire of Earth versus Kate T of Exran. Kor was the quadruped, a beast of raw power and primal fury. His forelegs churned the ground as he stepped forward, his massive head lowering to glare at Kara with glowing red eyes. He let out a thunderous roar, the sound shaking the very walls of the arena. The crowd roared in response, their excitement palpable. Kara's heart pounded as she faced him. She had no weapons, no armor, and no plan. All she had was her wits and the faint hope that she could outthink a creature designed for destruction. The starting gong sounded, and Kor charged. Kara barely had time to dive out of the way as the ground shook beneath his thunderous steps. He crashed into the wall behind her, sending a shower of debris flying into the air. Kara scrambled to her feet, her mind racing. She couldn't hope to match his strength or speed, but perhaps she didn't have to. The arena was full of hazards, lava pits, traps, unstable platforms. If she could lead him into one of them, she might stand a chance. Kor turned and charged again, his massive form barreling toward her like a freight train. Kara darted to the side, narrowly avoiding his crushing bulk. She led him toward a section of the arena where the ground glowed faintly. A trap, she hoped. Sure enough, as Kor stepped onto the glowing tiles, the ground beneath him gave way, revealing a pit of searing lava. He roared in surprise, his massive frame teetering on the edge. For a moment, it seemed he might fall in, but with a burst of strength, he leaped back to safety. Kara cursed under her breath. The trap hadn't been enough, but it had bought her time. She needed a new plan. Her eyes scanned the arena, taking in the shifting platforms and spiked barriers. An idea began to form. If she could lure Kor into a narrow corridor, he might impale himself on one of the spikes. It was risky, but it was the only option she had. She took off running, her boots pounding against the metal floor. Kor roared and gave chase, his bulk crashing through obstacles as if they were nothing. Kara led him into a tight passageway, the walls narrowing around them. She could hear his heavy breaths behind her, feel the heat of his rage as he closed the distance. At the last moment, she dove to the side, rolling out of the corridor just as Kor barreled through. His momentum carried him forward, and with a sickening crunch, he slammed into the spiked barrier at the end of the passage. The crowd erupted into cheers and gasps as the quadruped let out a final pained roar before collapsing. Kara lay on the ground, gasping for breath. She had survived the first round, but just barely. Her body ached. Her mind was a whirlwind of exhaustion and adrenaline, but she forced herself to stand. The next round would begin soon, and she couldn't afford to rest. The announcer's voice echoed through the arena. Karis and Claire of Earth advances to the semifinals. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered for the underdog, while others jeered, convinced her victory was a fluke. Kara didn't care. She had made it this far, and she wasn't about to stop now. Her next opponent was Vera. As the crystalline warrior stepped forward, Kara felt a pang of unease. Vera was different from the others. She wasn't a brute like Kor or a show-off like Gorith. She was calm, calculated, and impossibly fast. Kara knew this battle would be her greatest challenge yet. The gong sounded, and the two women circled each other. Vera moved with an almost hypnotic grace, her sharp edges glinting in the light. Kara kept her distance, waiting for an opening, but Vera didn't attack. Instead, she studied Kara, her crystalline eyes unblinking. "You've surprised me, human," Vera said, her voice carrying over the din of the crowd. "But ingenuity will only take you so far." Kara didn't reply. She couldn't afford to be distracted. Vera struck without warning, a blur of motion that left Kara scrambling to defend herself. The crystalline warrior's limbs were like blades, slicing through the air with deadly precision. Kara dodged and weaved, her heart pounding as she tried to stay one step ahead. She couldn't match Vera's speed or skill, but perhaps she didn't have to. The arena's hazards were still in play, and Kara began to formulate a plan. She lured Vera toward a section of the arena where the platform shifted unpredictably. As the crystalline warrior closed in, Kara timed her movements carefully, stepping onto a platform just as it began to rise. Vera followed, her sharp limbs slicing through the air, but as the platform shifted again, Kara leaped to safety, leaving Vera to struggle with the unstable footing. It was a small advantage, but it was enough. Kara pressed her attack, using the shifting platforms to keep Vera off balance. The crystalline warrior faltered, her sharp edges unable to find purchase on the unstable ground. In a final, desperate move, Kara triggered a nearby trap, sending a blast of energy toward Vera. The crystalline warrior was thrown backward, her form shattering into fragments as she hit the ground. The crowd erupted into chaos, their cheers and gasps filling the arena. Kara stood there, panting and trembling, as the announcer declared her the victor. She had done it. She had made it to the final round. But as she looked across the arena, her eyes met Gorith. The reptilian giant grinned, his sharp teeth glinting in the light. The real battle was just beginning. Kara stood at the edge of the arena, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she stared across the field at Gorith. The crowd roared in anticipation, the sound almost deafening, but Kara barely noticed. Her focus was on the towering reptilian warrior who loomed like a living mountain of muscle and menace. His golden scales shimmered under the harsh lights, and his eyes glowed with a predatory intensity that made her feel like prey. This was it, the final round, the culmination of the Galactic Strength Tournament. She had come farther than anyone, including herself, had thought possible. But as she faced Gorith, the undeniable truth settled in her chest like a stone. This was a battle she might not walk away from. The announcer's voice boomed overhead, heightening the tension. "Ladies and gentlemen of the galaxy, the moment you've been waiting for, the final battle of this year's tournament. Kara Sinclair of Earth, the underdog who defied all odds, versus Gorith of Zygron, the reigning champion and favorite to win. Let the duel begin." The arena shifted once more, transforming into its most dangerous configuration yet. Platforms rose and fell, some tipped precariously over bubbling lava pits, while others sparked with arcs of electricity. A thick fog rolled in from unseen vents, obscuring parts of the battlefield. The air crackled with tension, and Kara's every nerve screamed at her to run. But there was nowhere to go. It was fight or die. Gorith wasted no time. With a roar that shook the ground, he charged, his massive frame barreling toward Kara with terrifying speed. She barely managed to leap out of the way as he swung one of his clawed arms. The strike carved a deep gouge into the platform where she had stood. The force of his attack sent a shockwave through the arena, and Kara stumbled, struggling to regain her balance. "You've been lucky so far, human," Gorith growled, his voice a low rumble that carried easily over the noise of the crowd. "But luck won't save you now." Kara didn't respond. She couldn't afford to waste energy on words. Instead, she scanned the battlefield, looking for anything she could use to her advantage. The shifting platforms, the environmental hazards, these were her only weapons against an opponent who could crush her with one swipe of his claws. Gorith attacked again, his movements deceptively fast for someone of his size. Kara dodged and weaved, narrowly avoiding his strikes as she led him toward a section of the arena where the platforms were unstable. She leaped onto one just as it began to tilt, forcing Gorith to adjust his footing. He snarled in frustration, his claws digging into the platform to keep his balance. Kara seized the moment. She kicked a loose piece of debris toward a nearby lever, triggering a hidden trap. A burst of flames erupted from the ground, engulfing Gorith in a fiery explosion. The crowd gasped, and for a fleeting moment, Kara thought she might have gained the upper hand. But Gorith emerged from the flames unscathed, writhed, his golden scales glinting as if they had absorbed the fire rather than been burned by it. He grinned, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Is that all you've got?" Panic surged through Kara as he advanced, his claws slicing through the air with lethal precision. She ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding his attacks, but she knew she couldn't keep this up for long. Her body was already pushed to its limits, and every movement felt like wading through quicksand. Inspiration drove her next move. She led Gorith toward a section of the arena where the platforms were separated by wide gaps, the only way across being a series of swinging chains. Kara grabbed one of the chains and swung herself to the next platform, her heart pounding as she landed unsteadily. Gorith hesitated for a moment, clearly assessing whether the chains could support his massive weight. With a snarl, he leaped, bypassing the chains entirely and landing on the platform with a thundering crash. The impact sent Kara sprawling, and she barely had time to scramble to her feet before Gorith was on her again. He swiped at her with his claws, and this time, she wasn't fast enough. The edge of his strike caught her arm, tearing through the fabric of her suit and leaving a deep gash. Pain shot through her, but she gritted her teeth and kept moving. She couldn't stop, not now. Her vision blurred as she stumbled onto another platform, her mind racing. She needed to end this and fast. Her eyes fell on a section of the arena that was flickering erratically, an exposed energy conduit that crackled with electricity. If she could lure Gorith there, she might be able to disable him, at least temporarily. Summoning the last reserves of her strength, Kara taunted him. "Come on, Gorith. Is that the best you can do?" The reptilian warrior roared in fury, his pride clearly wounded. He charged after her, his claws tearing through the platforms as he closed the distance. Kara led him toward the flickering conduit, every step a calculated risk. When she reached the edge of the platform, she turned to face him, her legs trembling but her resolve unshaken. "Let's finish this," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Gorith lunged, his claws aimed straight for her. At the last possible moment, Kara dove to the side, rolling out of the way as his momentum carried him forward. He crashed into the conduit, and the arena was filled with a blinding flash of light as electricity surged through his body. Gorith let out a deafening roar, his massive frame convulsing as the energy overwhelmed him. When the light faded, Gorith lay motionless, his body smoking but still breathing. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices a mix of awe and disbelief. Kara collapsed to her knees, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. She had done it. Against all odds, she had defeated the reigning champion. The announcer's voice boomed overhead. "Kara Sinclair of Earth is the new champion of the Galactic Strength Tournament." Medical drones swarmed the arena, tending to both Kara and Gorith as the medics patched up her wounds. Kara looked up at the stands, where thousands of aliens were on their feet, cheering for her. She had proven that strength wasn't just about muscles or size. It was about determination, ingenuity, and the will to survive. As she was escorted off the arena floor, Vera approached her, her crystalline form still showing signs of damage from their earlier battle. "You earned this," she said, her voice devoid of malice. "You've shown the galaxy what humans are capable of." Kara nodded, too exhausted to reply. She had survived and she had won. But more importantly, she had shattered the stereotypes about her species, proving that humanity had a place in the galaxy's grand tapestry. The victory wasn't just hers, it was Earth's. And as she boarded the transport ship that would take her home, Kara couldn't help but smile. She had done the impossible. She had made history.